Hello YouTube vintage radio collectors. Now it's hard to tell exactly what this is by the chassis, but this is from a Crosley Fiver 5M3 Junior Tombstone radio. The case is right here. And just want to say a few things about this. I haven't done a radio like this in ages. A couple years ago I moved from the house where I had the bigger workshop into this condo type of thing. So I work at the dining room table now, but actually in some ways it's kind of like going back to where I started almost 50 years ago on these, working on a card table or working out in the garage, you know. And I picked stuff like this up, and for nothing back in those days. People are throwing them out in the 70s, and I cleaned them up, and that was the biggest thing about this one. It was absolutely filthy inside. It had a greasy gunge just about everywhere. It's all the original Crosley tubes except for the tungsten and the Sylvania, and it's this type of tube. So this is an 80, a 42, a 76, the Coke bottle style tubes. Over here 266s, which is actually very much like a 78, and they're shielded because they tend to oscillate, these tubes. And it's a very simple radio. This was a low-cost radio made in 1934 to about 1936. Pretty simple. It is a super heck design. It doesn't have the traditional IF cans. It has these pattern capacitors on the chassis. So just tell you a little bit about it. When I got it, filthy dirty, original cord. It actually had a break and a burn in it, so I didn't even plug the thing in. Pulled the tubes out of it, cleaned them off, just with marker labeled what they are. The sockets actually say what they are, stamped right on the socket. And cleaned up the chassis, and I used Ronsonol and some Lysol wipes. A little bit of Windex in certain areas to cut through the grease, but got it down pretty nice and clean. And just to show you a little more about this, it's not a very big chassis, it's AM only. On the back are some solder terminals where the electromagnetic speaker gets hooked up. So this has an electromagnetic Magnavox speaker. The transformer is match transformers right on the speaker. The speaker had 3 different tears in the paper. The paper is so fragile, I didn't even want to get near it. I thought the speaker was garbage. But using some tissue paper and some Mod Podge, I actually pieced the speaker back together, let it dry. It's really solid now. That Mod Podge works miracles on old speaker cones. Now I'll show you what's underneath. This chassis was filled with paper capacitors. Some were wax, some were just plain paper, and some I actually cleaned out the waste paper basket this morning, but some were these weird double caps. So you had a strap in the middle that went to a ground lug, and then 2 caps, like 2 caps, one on each side. And what I do, nobody makes anything like that, and trying to stuff them is ridiculous. Anyway, I use these orange dip type of capacitors, and I actually buy them from Just Radios, but they're available on the internet almost anywhere. And so put in a terminal strip. The other thing about these radios, I don't know what it is, the resistors in these things, they're small carbon resistors, most of them undersized. There was a wire wound resistor here. The wire wound was open on one side, so there wouldn't have been any audio on this at all. So feeding the second tube, which is the IF, the 66, it wouldn't have had any bias on the grid, so it wouldn't have worked. So I just put 2 5-watt new resistors in there. And what I found is every resistor I tested, except for one, was way off. Like I'm talking about, it would be a 50K, well, it would be 90K. They all had drifted to higher values. And I run across this before. I used to, just replace the ones to get it working. But now, the lugs are nice and big on this. It's easy to solder on. So what you do is just 2 terminal strips, replace the missing components, use metal oxide resistors, the 2-watt ones. They're a little bit overkill, but it's done forever now. The cap, the main filter cap, was 2.8 microfarad, 350 volts, and at 12, I believe, 25 volts, and it was completely dried up and useless, and it's a very odd shape. And the tar that's inside these, I don't want to touch it. I used to take the tar out and put caps in, but I don't know what that tar is, like whether it's PCBs or, you know, any kind of weird dioxin. So what I do is just snip it off, and there's so much room under this chassis. Put a 22 microfarad 450 here on the B+, and then of course it goes through the coil, the field coil. The speaker comes back, another 22 microfarad, and then a little 25 microfarad, which would be the cathode capacitor on the 42 output tube. The only original resistor is this one here. It's a wire wound, and it's the cathode bias resistor. It's a 750 ohm or 752 ohm. So that was original. These things here are actually the coil portion of the IF cans, the interstage transformers. So this would, later on, you'd have 2 towers with a double coil in each. This is basically the same thing. And of course the cord was chewed. I just put a standard plastic cord on it. I do sometimes buy the cloth ones, I just didn't have it. So basically what you got on this one is every capacitor has been replaced. Every resistor has been replaced since one. New filter capacitors, cleaned up. So the speaker's fixed up. I plugged it in, turned it on, got nothing. And turned out that one of the, on the main tuning condenser, one of the plates has somehow gotten bent in, maybe had some rough handling, and it was shorting out the oscillator, so unbent that, started to get stations. This needs a good long wire antenna to work, but actually doesn't sound bad. I was surprised considering how bad the paper was on the speaker, how good it sounds. And I don't have it hooked up right now. Just to show you a little bit about it. Maybe I'll do another video of how it is to get stations on this. Anyway, thanks for watching and listening.